Well, welcome to Coach's Corner. I've collated a selection of your questions to answer today. But if you have your very own specific question, well, you can leave it beneath this video or any of our other videos using that hashtag GTN Coach's Corner. And we might well be answering yours in a show coming up soon. Well, we've got 5 questions to go through this week, including transition bags and how to use them, upgrading to deep alloy wheels, are tri-bars slowing me down, racing in the cold wind and rain, and how to pace hills in a race. And to kick us off, we have the first one from Just John P. And he says, I am due to do my first Ironman 70.3 in Kashkai in October. I have never done one of this size before, and most of the ones I have done are generally single transition areas. I'm confused as to how the actual multiple bags for multiple transition areas work. Can you provide a bit of insight or advice on what to pack and how it all works, as reading different websites gets confusing and slightly overwhelming? Well, it can sound a little confusing, and you're given these bags, you've got a huge amount of kit, and you really need to make sure you get the right stuff in the right bag, because you're not going to be able to go from one bag to the other. So Ironman tends to have the same system for all of their races, and other races vary. So in that case, you would need to read the race pack very clearly. But basically, you'll probably be given 3 bags. And the first bag is in theory the least important one. That's the bag that you put your clothes in that you'll want at the end of the race. And it's then the bag that you're going to use to put your swim stuff in once you finish the swim. But we'll go through it methodically. You've also got another bag that will be labelled bike bag and another bag that will be labelled run bag. And they're kind of self-explanatory. Those are the things that you're going to be putting in them that you need for said event. So you'll start the day and you'll need to bring along your filled bike bag, your filled run bag, hand them in to transition, and they'll be put in the correct place, or you'll do it yourself depending on the setup, and that's where you'll go to find it. It won't be next to your bike, or it won't be sort of laid out with your shoes by your bike, for example. So it's a way to just keep transition area tidier and fit more bikes into a smaller space. So if we go through the bike bag, that is obviously where you need to put all of your things that you might need that once you're on the bike, excluding what is attached to your bike. So you'd already put your water bottles and your bike computer on your bike, most probably, or hopefully. So then it's everything else. It's going to be your helmet, your sunglasses, socks if you're choosing to wear them, your bike shoes, your race belt, your race number, anything else that you might want to, if you want to put sun cream on after the swim, or any lubrication, or any extra nutrition that you're going to put in your pockets that isn't on your bike. All of that needs to be in your bike bag. So if we rewind, you've obviously got to the swim, you've got changed into your wetsuit, you then put the clothes you're wearing into that street bag, hand that in. So now you're in all of your swimming kit. Then once you get out of the swim, you will come to that bike bag that's been handed in, and you will take off your swim stuff. And basically, you will put on all of the bike stuff, and what's left, put into that bag, do it up, and leave it in one place. So that then almost becomes your old swim bag, if you're still with me. And then the final bag is your run kit, which is a few less items potentially, but basically, essentially your running shoes. That's the big one. Socks if you've not worn socks on the bike, and then anything else you might want, like a different pair of sunnies, a visor, any other nutrition that you want to pick up and run with. And yeah, even if you're going to change some clothing, that's the bag to put that in. And a bit like the earlier on, you're going to take off your bike kit, put on your run kit, and put all your spare bike kit into that run bag. And then finish the run, you'll get to the finish, you'll be given your bag with your casual clothes that you handed in first thing in the morning. It might seem like a long process, but actually it does all flow, and it's a good idea to lay your kit out in sort of 3 separate sections when you're packing, whether that's the night before, and almost go through the transition of in your mind, or like holding each piece up and thinking, right, this is what I'm going to need to put on when I get to the bike. This is what I'm going to need to put on when I get to the run, and checking that is in the right bag. And then you can't really go too wrong. I would suggest having a tick list, which you can start long before your race, and you just know then that if you tick that all off, you should have everything in there. It's just a nice methodical way. But so yeah, don't panic about it. Just break it down and go through methodically. That would be my tip. But it can be a little overwhelming. And also when you've got your stickers and you get given everything at the start of the race, there's a lot to look at, but it's normally clearly explained if you follow those instructions. Okay. Next question from Nick Van Dam. I ride a 12-year-old rim brake road bike with tri-bars. I was considering upgrading wheels. Are alloy aero wheels any good? I can't find anything on the subject, which makes me wary. Thanks. Well, Deeper wheels are faster as they are more aerodynamic, as we've done and shown in lots of videos. However, going to deeper alloy wheels is only going to be a benefit if they're deeper and the same weight or lighter. But if they start to become heavier, then you're going to be more likely to be slowed down, especially if you've got any hills involved. So that's the reason that we don't see that many deep section alloy wheels. And if you are looking to upgrade your wheels, you might be even better off actually just getting some shallower carbon wheels that are just still going to be more aerodynamic than potentially your old alloy ones, or looking at some of the options in the second-hand market for some sort of carbon upgrade, because they'll be that much lighter, and just if they're more modern, they're more likely to have more aerodynamic gains even if they're not that deeper wheel. So hopefully that helps, and there are lots of carbon wheels that you can use with disc brake, with rim brakes as well. So yeah, I would have a look, and like you say, there's not much choice when it comes to deep alloy wheels for a very good reason. Okay, Scott Mitchell has this question. I've been a huge fan of using clip-on aero bars for years now. Recently, however, noticed more and more people doing bike time trials in the road bike category and still doing 10 miles in good times, sometimes under 22 minutes. Obviously, these guys are great riders, but it makes me wonder if it could be worth riding short triathlons without aero bars. I often struggle with a stitch and cramps when running off the bike, and perhaps the position on the drops might make it easier to transition into the run. Well, firstly, the guys that are riding in that aggressive position on their drops on the road bikes are still going to be in a relatively aero position because they're holding themselves in that. That requires quite a lot of core and back strength, as well as quite a lot of arm strength, because you're holding that weight through your hands as opposed to the aero bars when you're going to be resting on your arm. So these guys are probably incredibly conditioned to riding road bikes without their TT bars, and maybe they don't feel the need to change when they do most of their riding like that anyway, and they don't want to alter for that. But also, I expect they're exceptionally strong riders to be riding that fast on a road bike, and if you did put them on a bike with clip-on aero bars, it'd be interesting to see. They'd probably go even quicker once they're conditioned to it, and that's the real key here, is what you're used to. And if you're used to riding on those aero bars and you feel comfortable in that position, then that's going to be better for you. And just from personal experience, I know riding on the drops, it feels like you've got more control and you are kind of be almost as aero, but it's going to take a lot more control to hold there. And if you're saying that you're getting a stitch and cramps when you get off the bike to run, that could be to do with your position if you haven't had a good setup with the TT bars. But if you're then riding on the drops, that's only going to be exacerbated because you're actually probably getting a little bit more squished or more of an acute angle at your hips than on the TT bars. So it could actually exacerbate that if it's coming from the bike. If it's coming from something else, then I'd suggest checking your nutrition, looking at how hard you're going on the bike as well, and just generally your conditioning for your running. But yeah, as a result of thinking you'd go faster, we've done various tests in the wind tunnel where aero bars do still beat riding on the drops, unless that is all you ever do and you'd be uncomfortable and not in the right position. However, it sounds like you have the TT bars, so we would suggest you stick with the TT bars and maybe just have to do a bit more training to try and catch up with those guys at 22 minutes. Next up, Niv Fromham has this. I wonder if you could give some suggestions and tips about doing a triathlon race in the cold, wind or rain. There's not much out there, and having recently faced such conditions on a race, ending up with frozen toes at the end of the bike leg, I think it'd be greatly helpful. What to wear, how to manage a change of gear during transition in the most time-efficient way, etc. I, for instance, found that wearing a plastic bag under my tri-suit, thanks to Sam Long for that tip, really helped against the cold wind on the bike. Well, one of the things I love about triathlon is it is a summer sport. However, if you do it in countries like here in the UK, then it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be warm and sunny, and you do need to prepare for that. And it's a good idea to have things in transition. If the forecast looks even slightly dodgy, then you've got the options when the race starts and you get out of the swim. Also, if the swim is really cold, you might take a bit longer to warm up and your dexterity might be a little bit poor when you come to getting changed. But the bike is the aspect where you're probably going to get the coldest, like you've mentioned. So this is where you want to spend a little bit of extra time in your first transition, which can end up saving you a lot of time in the long run. So potentially drying your feet and putting on socks is going to just help prevent those numb toes. Also, having things like toe covers over your shoes. It's something I've done in many a triathlon race before, because they're already on your shoes. They're not going to slow you down for having to put them on, and they just give you that little added protection. And in some cases, they can be of an aero variety as well. You could go for a full over shoe, but obviously it takes a bit more time and effort to put on, and that's if the conditions are really extreme and maybe you're doing a really long distance race. And then further up the body, gloves I would seriously recommend for a race if it's much length, but also, you're going to be able to change gear and still feel your hands. So it's kind of quite essential. If it's really cold, a headband under your helmet is something that can be quite nice. And then your torso is the area you really want to keep dry. And I've definitely done a few triathlons with a gilet. So maybe if you've got one that's a little bit more aerodynamic, that would be great. And if it's small enough, if you do get really hot, if you've got back pockets, you should be able to take it off and put it in there if need be. And another aspect to think about is making sure that you stay hydrated enough and fueled enough, because if you're really cold, you probably don't want to drink your water, or whatever you've got for hydration, but you still really need to be on top of that because your body's still going to be working hard. And hopefully, once you get into the race and you're working hard enough, then your body will naturally generate that warmth and warm you up. But it's all about being prepared and taking it a tiny bit longer in transition so that overall you'll be able to race much faster. But it does just give me the shudders, the thought of doing a triathlon in bad weather. We've certainly done a few here on the channel and it's never fun, but it does feel more satisfying, doesn't it, once you've finished. Moving on to our next question from Robin. Just finished my first 140.6. What's the best way to handle the hills on the bike? Using a power meter for cycling, but I live in a very flat area and inevitably whenever I race, there are hills. Is it better to try and maintain your watts for your planned pacing going uphill and taking longer going up, or going at a higher wattage output to get up a little quicker? I'm not talking about long, steady climbs, but on more of a rolling, punchy climb type course. The downhill doesn't give much time to recover usually, and I've not quite figured out this skill. Well, it's a great question, and it's quite a hard one to answer because it depends on quite a few things and the length of the hills. I know you say rolling, punchy, so not quite sure what these hills look like, but to start with, you want to gain or maintain as much momentum into each hill as you can. So that potentially does mean if you go a little bit harder at the bottom, you're going to help get up that hill a bit quicker. Now, there's also a exponential curve when it comes to speed and aerodynamics. So when you are going slower, you've got less air resistance, and therefore if you do put in a little bit more power for that to get up that hill a bit quicker, you're kind of gaining more in a sense because you're not having as much wind resistance as you would be going on the flat. But then also you don't want to be punching up these hills and going well into the red so that your legs don't have time to recover before the next one, and then before you know it, you'll have burnt all your matches, you'll get to the run and your legs will be a little bit exhausted. So when it comes to your training, do practice some mild changes in your power. But if you do know what your average power is that you want to hold, it's fine to go above that up a hill because you just naturally find that it's easier to put more power up a hill anyway. So don't get fixed on staying on that exact same power because you'll find yourself probably feeling a bit almost too easy and going very slowly, and everyone else will be going past you on that. But set yourself an upper limit of where you know that you can kind of go up to a few times and it's not really going to hurt you. So say you ride at maybe 200 watts, then you might want to cap that at 250 or maybe even a bit lower than that. But this is something you can experiment with. You can experiment with that in training if you train on an indoor trainer or just out on the roads of just going up to that and how that feels and coming back down again. And obviously when you come to the downhill, you'll struggle to hit those numbers with the same power depending on how steep they are. So that's another reason you want to push a bit higher going uphill, because otherwise your average power is going to be lower than it would be on the flat. So it's kind of a bit of a balance of making sure that you spin your legs and you still work hard enough downhill that you're keeping that momentum, yet your legs are recovering, but they're not having to recover too much from too big an effort uphill. So more races, it will become sort of clearer to you where those limits are for yourself. But yeah, use your numbers to guide you, but also try to go by feel and how out of breath you are, and how if you can start to feel that it's really, you're almost going into that lactate point, you don't want to be anywhere near that. So don't be afraid to fluctuate slightly, but try and stay within what feels relatively comfortable, I think. But sometimes we can get bogged down in numbers of going, oh gosh, I can't go too high here, that's going to ruin it. Just remember to listen to your body at the same time as listening to your bike computer. Okay, that concludes this week's Coach's Corner. Some really interesting and quite a nice mix of questions there. So thank you guys for those. Remember, you can leave more of yours down below. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you want to support the channel, we'd love it if you clicked on the globe and you subscribed.